The first time Silvia Robinson undergoes ECT, she is all alone. Even Gregory Fisher, her fiance who loves her so much, is nowhere to be seen. After the doctor gives her a muscle relaxant, she starts to get drowsy. She is in a daze when she recalls what happened that evening. She has waited 3 hours in line for a special cake, which she is planning to surprise Gregory with. However, she comes home to see Gregory kissing her younger sister, Ella Robinson. The two are deep in a kiss as they hold each other tightly in an inseparable embrace. The cake in Silvia's hands drops to the floor, smashed beyond recognition as Silvia delivers a slap across Gregory's face. Then, she finds herself being pushed down the stairs by Ella. As she rolls down the stairs, Silvia feels like she has already seen this coming. Anyone close to her will eventually be taken away by her sister. Ella Robinson was enthusiastic and generous, and she reminded people of the sun. In contrast, Silvia Robinson was quiet, just like her name, and she was just like a shadow without any sort of presence. From the moment Gregory Fisher first met Ella, Silvia had a bad feeling about it. Back then, Silvia reassured herself that she and Gregory had been together for a decade, so it wouldn't happen. But harsh reality proved that Silvia couldn't have been more wrong. Gregory had sent her to the hospital and kept watch by her bed. He was even worried that the fluid would make her hands cold, so he asked the nurse for a heating pad to keep her warm. "That kiss was an accident," Gregory said. "I just think of her as you, a younger and livelier version of you. Silvia, why do you have to be so strong and distant? I always feel like you don't need me anymore. Anyway, this won't happen again. As for Ella, well, she's your sister, after all, and she's so young too. Don't hold it against her, okay?" Silvia lowered her gaze, and she suddenly laughed. "Are you telling me all this just because you're worried that I might drive Ella out?" Gregory's breath hitched as he gripped Silvia's hand. "Silvia, I know you're still upset about it. It's okay. I'll stay with you until you feel better." Silvia pulled her hand from Gregory's grasp, then turned over so that she had her back to him. She could hear Gregory sighing behind her, as if he were dealing with a spoiled child. Just then his phone rang, and she could hear Ella's voice coming through the phone. "Gregory, I'm scared. I'm all alone at home. Can you come back and keep me company? I didn't mean to push Silvia. I was just heartbroken when I saw her slapping you. Later on I calmed down and thought about it. I really didn't push her that hard, so I have no idea why Silvia would suddenly fall down the stairs like that." After reassuring Ella in a low voice, Gregory said to Silvia, "Something came up at work. I'll be right back." Then he hurried out of the hospital. Gregory never once returned, not even after Silvia was discharged. The injury in Silvia's legs hadn't completely healed. She only left the hospital because she didn't want to deal with any more visitors. Over the past few days, lots of people had come to see her, but they were always repeating the same things. They all wanted her to forgive Ella. She had no idea what Ella told them, but all her friends and colleagues were looking at her with heavy condemnation. They said things like, "Ella is practically a child. No matter how terrible her mother was, you can't just take out your anger on a child, can you? You're her only sister and the only family she has left. If even you are holding a bias against her, she'll really be all alone." When Silvia heard her best friend, Tessa Meyer, saying those words in self-righteousness, she felt her heart grow cold. She did indeed feel some resentment. However, she had never once mistreated Ella. Even when Ella wanted to study abroad, she had sent Ella overseas as soon as she had scraped together the money. Everyone seemed to have conveniently forgotten that their father, Jared Robinson, had eloped with Ella's mother when Silvia was barely 3 years old. He had taken all their wealth and walked out, leaving Silvia and her mother, Rosalind Hall, drowning in debt. Rosalind resented her husband, and she took it all out on Silvia. She worked hard to raise her daughter, but she was also cursing and shouting at her. Silvia studied hard, got into a famous school, landed a job at a major tech company, and met Gregory. Just when everything was looking up, the Robinsons brought Ella along and came knocking. Jared and his wife died in an accident, leaving their daughter all alone. Ella is 13 years old, and you're her older sister by blood. It's your responsibility to care for her until she's of age. As a father, Jared had never once called Silvia or sent her any money in all those years. But now, according to the law, Silvia had to raise the child of the couple who had been the root of all their suffering. Left with no other choice, Silvia took Ella in. She herself was only 20 years old, but she had to take care of her 13-year-old sister like a mother. Sometimes, things got too busy at work, so Silvia had no choice but to bring Ella to the office. Ella was Jared and his wife's only daughter, so of course, they spoiled her and raised her to be cheerful and self-assured. Silvia's friends and colleagues started out feeling some sort of aversion to Ella, but they gradually grew to like her. "Your sister is much more likable than you." Silvia had heard the people around her tell her that more often than she had liked. And even now, the man she had been dating for a decade shared the same opinion. "Silvia, wake up." In her daze, Silvia heard someone gently calling her name. With her thoughts interrupted, Silvia opened her eyes to find that the session was over. She got up, and the nurse removed the equipment attached to her head. The nurse said, You may experience a decline in memory during this period, and that's normal. Just be sure to stick to a regular daily routine. Don't forget your next appointment." Silvia nodded, jotting down everything the nurse had said in the notebook that she carried with her at all times. With every ECT session she went through, she gradually began to forget lots of things. So she wrote down everything she had to do in the notebook. She tried to remember, but realized that events in the past seemed to have been shrouded in fog. She felt like a bystander, calm and rational. At the top of her notes, she saw 2 points written in bold red font. The first one was to sever official ties to Ella. The second was to break up with Gregory. Silvia vaguely remembered that she had already severed official ties with Ella before her treatment. She turned on her phone and noticed that her last conversation with Ella had taken place before she saw Ella and Gregory kissing. Ella had sweetly asked Silvia for a pair of limited edition shoes. Silvia had been financially strapped when she was 18 years old. She couldn't even bring herself to buy clothes that cost more than $30. She knew Ella cared about her appearance, and she also knew at that stage in life, Ella would have a strong sense of self-esteem. So Silvia had wired the money without saying anything. Ella had silently received the money without a single response. Sighing, Silvia closed the chat window with Ella and navigated to Gregory's. Their last conversation had taken place the day after Silvia was hospitalized. He had said, "I'm very worried about you." It had been almost 2 weeks since Silvia got discharged. In those 2 weeks, she had booked her appointments for ECT, gone through the preliminary tests, and completed her first course of treatment. She wasn't quite sure what Gregory was worrying about. When Silvia got home and opened the door to find Gregory and her own friends celebrating Ella's 21st birthday, she finally got her answer. With her backpack on her back, Silvia was carrying the pills prescribed to her as she opened the door with some difficulty. It was then that she heard a wave of wishes. "Happy birthday, Ella." Silvia made her way to the living room to see everyone gathered around Ella as they sang the birthday song. Ella had tears in her eyes, and she looked pleasantly surprised as she hugged Gregory tightly. When a friend accidentally caught sight of Silvia at the entrance, she let out a small cough. The whole room fell silent when they realized that Silvia had come home. A moment later, Gregory asked a little awkwardly, "Silvia, you got discharged already? Why didn't you tell me? I could have picked you up." Silvia looked at the man she had been dating for a decade. Now he felt more like a stranger to her. She was really upset when she saw him and Ella kissing back then. She was betrayed by the 2 people closest to her, whom she had given everything to. The pain was so intense that she had almost lost her balance. She was about to fly off the handle with curses and questions when she remembered how her own mother had gotten drunk and screamed hysterically at her. She didn't want to retrace Rosalind's steps, so she could only force herself to remain calm. But now, as she looked at Gregory, she felt like her heart had been squeezed, but the pain only lasted a fleeting moment. Avoiding Gregory, who had reached out to help her with her backpack, Silvia said indifferently, "I didn't get much peace and quiet in the hospital, so I might as well just go home." As soon as she said that, all her friends at the scene felt a little awkward. Tessa stepped forward and tried to smooth things over. "Silvia, you're just in time. It's Ella's birthday today, remember? Gregory even specifically told us not to reveal anything to Ella. Here, we all chipped in to get her a gift. Since you're her sister, you're the best person to give it to her." With that, a small, exquisite box was pressed into Silvia's hands. Silvia froze on the spot. A moment later, she eventually decided to take the box and hand it to Ella. Ella had been living with Silvia since she was 13 years old, and she was a full-fledged adult now. Silvia had been Ella's dependable sister for years, so this gift would be the perfect ending to everything she had done for Ella throughout the years. With the gift presented to her, Ella reached out to take it, but for some reason it dropped onto the floor. The box was smashed open, revealing a beautiful glass bead bracelet that was now broken to pieces. When Ella saw that, she was on the verge of tears. "Silvia, are you still mad at me? That was just an accident. I swear I didn't do it on purpose. I've been really worried about you while you were hospitalized. I was so scared that you wouldn't forgive me." Realizing that Ella was crying, the others hastily went over to comfort her. They were all glaring at Silvia with unapproving looks. "Silvia, I can't believe you're still mad at your own sister. It's Ella's birthday, so can't you just let her be happy on an important day like this?" Silvia looked at the people reprimanding her, staring at their incessantly moving mouths. Right in the middle was her fiance, whom she had loved for a decade. He was looking at her in disappointment. Silvia heard a sudden roar ringing in her ears. Her vision began to blur as well, and she almost lost her balance. She thought, either way, at least just get these people out of here. Just then, Gregory spoke up. "All right, stop blaming it on Silvia. She just got discharged after all." Walking up to Silvia, he touched her forehead with a look of concern and said in a gentle tone, "Don't hold it against Ella. She's just a child." Then, he picked up the box on the floor and handed it to Silvia. "She probably just got a little careless and dropped it, so just give it to her again. It's Ella's birthday after all. You two should sit down and have a good talk over dinner. Sort things out, you know? You'll still need to get along with each other down the road. Gregory's voice was gentle, but he was discreetly tightening his grip on Silvia's shoulder. Silvia took a deep breath and let out a sigh. Then she shook Gregory's hand off. She said in a quiet voice, "There's no need. We're probably not going to live together anymore." As gasps spread throughout the crowd, she continued, "Actually, I came back just to pack my things and move out." Suddenly, the silence was broken by Ella's sobs. Tears continuously fell from her reddened eyes, and her nose had turned red as well. She looked quite pitiful. "Silvia, are you driving me out?" Ella covered her mouth, her eyes filled with disbelief. Then she turned to Gregory, saying helplessly, "Gregory, what do we do? You promised me that you'd explain everything to Silvia, but even now, she refuses to believe me." Gregory patted Ella's head, comforting her. His jaw was tense as he stared intently at Silvia. His brows were tightly knitted, and his lips were pressed into a thin line. He had obviously lost his patience. When Silvia saw that, she suddenly felt a sense of powerlessness. Before she could explain herself, a friend was already scolding her. "Silvia, that's too much. If you drive Ella out right now, where is she going to stay? She'll be all alone out there, and she's still so young. What if something happens to her? How could you bear to do such a thing?" With a look of compassion, Tessa pleaded on Ella's behalf. "Just forget it, Silvia. Can't you see how sad Ella is right now? Also, she's still so young. What is she going to do if you drive her out?" Silvia stared at her friend of many years. Back then, Tessa fell for a scam and lost her life savings. Silvia was the one who had given Tessa all the money she had saved up so Tessa would have a place to stay. Back then, Tessa's eyes were brimming with gratitude as she hugged Silvia and called Silvia her best friend. But now, she was turning against Silvia, reprimanding her in defense of her sister, who had kissed her fiancé. Silvia stared at the woman who had been friends with her since their youth, feeling a vast emptiness inside her heart. "Tessa, I know we're close, but this is a family matter. Moreover, I'm moving out, so this house." Before she could finish speaking, Gregory cut her off. "Enough, Silvia. Tessa was just speaking up for Ella. Also, Ella is your sister, so this is her house too." He comforted Ella in a soft voice, then glared at Silvia. "At the end of the day, you're still holding a grudge over what happened between Ella and me. No matter how hard we try to explain ourselves, you'll never believe us. But she's still so young. If something's bothering you, just come to me. There's no need to take it out on her." Having been cut off, Silvia realized she couldn't get a say anymore. She pursed her lips, suddenly losing the will to even speak. When Gregory realized that Silvia wasn't talking, his frown deepened. Ella timidly approached Silvia, then took her hand and pleaded, "Silvia, please stop being mad at me. I promise I'll stop talking to Gregory. You're the only family I have left. If you abandon me, I'll really have nowhere to go." Silvia didn't say anything, but she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her hand. She instinctively tried to shake her hand free, sending Ella stumbling back and falling hard onto the floor. Silvia reached out to help Ella up, but Gregory shoved her away. "Don't touch her." She had never seen Gregory lose his cool like that. His worried expression, trembling hands, and concerned whisper seemed to prick ceaselessly at her heart. "Gregory, my ankle hurts. I think I might have sprained it." Ella frowned. Gregory immediately picked her up in his arms. Before he left, he glared at Silvia. "I'm getting her some help. In the meantime, you should calm down and think things through on your own." After a pause, he added, "Silvia, I'm really disappointed in you." Out of view, Silvia's hand twitched a little. She sniffled quietly, trying to ease the stinging sensation in her nose. The crowd didn't say a word as they watched on, but they were all looking at Silvia in condemnation. Tessa suggested, "Why don't we all accompany Ella to the hospital? We'll celebrate her birthday elsewhere." Someone agreed, "Sure. The mood is completely ruined at this point anyway. What rotten luck. About time we turn things around, huh?" As Silvia endured their glares and listened to their loaded remarks, she suddenly felt indignation welling up inside her. "Are you done talking? If you are, the door's that way. After all, at the end of the day, I own this house." A guy who had been trying to win Ella's heart said in disgust, "Huh, why are you talking like we all want to be here? If it weren't for Ella, I wouldn't even be stepping foot in this place. You're just jealous because Ella is more popular than you anyway. I can't believe an old hag is trying to compete for attention. How disgusting." Silvia saw Gregory stiffen for a moment. However, he didn't turn around as he silently left with Ella in his arms. The crowd passed by Silvia, slamming the door on their way out. The door creaked on its hinges as it swung shut. Silvia could hear cheers following Ella fading into the distance. "Yay. Thank you, Gregory. You're the best." Then everything faded into calm silence. Only Silvia was left standing in the empty living room, staring quietly at the exquisite cake on the table and the banner on the wall that read, "Happy birthday, Ella." For some reason, she reached out and scraped a bit of cream off the cake to taste it. It was very sweet, so sweet that it made her heart ache. Silvia suddenly remembered that when she was a child, Only her grandmother would remember her birthday and give her small cakes that looked just like this. Now that her grandmother was gone, she had lost the only person in the world who loved her. And now, even this house, which was the only thing Silvia had to remember her grandmother by, had to be sold off to pay for her medical bills. Back when she saw Ella and Gregory lost in their passionate kiss, back when she slapped Gregory and was pushed down the stairs by Ella, and back when she lay alone on the hospital bed, thirsting for some water while her friends reprimanded her, Silvia had already decided to leave this place. She didn't want to be what the Fisher family called a daughter-in-law who married into high society, nor did she want to keep being the older sister who made sacrifices without complaint or regret. She wanted to be nothing but herself, just Silvia Robinson. Notifications sounded on her phone. She had received 2 messages. One of them was from Gregory. "I was a bit too harsh just now. Don't take it to heart. We have a long road ahead of us." The other message was a reminder from the hospital on her next appointment, which was coming up in 2 weeks. After her treatment was completely finished, she would forget everything. She would use the money she earned from selling the house and travel to a small city with a breathtaking view, and she would start over from there. Silvia only replied to the nurse. Then she stooped over and picked up the ribbons scattered all over the floor. Gregory probably got it all wrong. The moment Silvia saw him kissing Ella, the road ahead of them had already been cut off. After tidying the rooms, Silvia called over the agent she had contacted beforehand. After taking some photos and uploading them to the app, the agent seemed a little hesitant. "Ms. Robinson, this house is in a great location, and it has been well maintained too. For the past few years, the housing prices in this location have been rising, and I'm sure they'll continue to rise in the future. If you're not in a hurry to sell it, you can get an even better price if you wait." Silvia simply smiled and shook her head. She thanked the agent, then said it was fine. After the agent left, Silvia sat on the couch and stared at her surroundings in bewilderment. Because she was selling the house, she had already packed most of her belongings into boxes and had them put into paid storage. The house looked quite empty at that moment. Beside her was her grandmother's favorite chair, and the desk she had made herself was standing in her room. However, the person in the chair and the photo of them on the desk were both gone. Silvia remembered that when she was a child, Rosalind would always be extremely exhausted. She was so tired that she didn't want to talk. Instead, all she did was cry. Silvia wanted to comfort her, but whenever she walked closer, Rosalind would grab her and hit her. She would cry as she hit Silvia and shouted, "It's all because of you and your heartless dad. If it weren't for you, I would have remarried a long time ago. I'm suffering all because of you and your dad. You're a selfish brat too. It only makes sense. With your dad's blood running in your veins, how could you not be?" Silvia didn't know what to do. She was in pain, and she wanted to push Rosalind away. But when she looked up, seeing the bitter agony in Rosalind's face and feeling her tears splashing on her cheeks, she lowered her arms. Back then, Silvia thought that if this would ease Rosalind's pain, she would be willing to put up with it. After Rosalind calmed down, she would act as if it hadn't happened. She would cook Silvia's favorite dishes and patiently mend Silvia's torn clothes. She would say to Silvia, "Silvia, darling, please work hard at school. Don't end up like me, pinning your hopes on the wrong person, and living the rest of your life in hatred and regret." Silvia had mixed feelings about Rosalind. She couldn't completely hate her, nor could she love her wholeheartedly. Throughout her dark years of growing up, her grandmother was her only light. Her grandmother would always give her the candy she loved, gently apply ointment on her bruises, take her out for a treat, and tell her she wasn't a burden. Silvia whispered, "Grandma, I'm leaving soon. I'm sorry I couldn't keep the house." Suddenly, her phone vibrated. She took out her phone to see that it was a message from Gregory. "You left your necklace at my place. When are you coming over to get it?" Silvia tapped on the photo. The necklace was a gift from Gregory for their 10th anniversary. It was a custom chomette piece, and the ruby set on top had a fiery glimmer in it that was visible even in photos. When Silvia received the necklace, she had been stunned by the dazzling brilliance as well. However, the next second, Gregory's mother, Wendy Burton, called her. "You're smart, aren't you? You know that if it's a transfer of funds, it'll be reclaimed, so you got my son to give you jewelry instead. I'm impressed that an orphan like you could come up with such tricks." Gregory's expression shifted, but he could only look at Wendy helplessly and complain, "Mom." Silvia declined Gregory's offer to help her put it on. She just kept it in the safe and cherished it. Sometimes she would take it out and admire it. But now, there was no reason to get it back anymore. Silvia replied, "Just hold on to it for now." After responding to the message, she fell into a deep sleep. When she woke up, she saw Gregory sitting by the bed. Noticing that Silvia was awake, Gregory said in a hoarse voice, "You're up. I came to visit and also to drop off your necklace." Silvia didn't get up. She took the necklace and placed it absent-mindedly on the table. "Thanks. Actually, you don't have to come by this late just to deliver it." Gregory shook his head. "This necklace is different." He held her hands, continuing, Whenever I see this necklace, I remember all the moments we've shared together. We've weathered so many storms, but now, because of a trivial matter, we're fighting and giving each other the silent treatment." As he spoke, his voice seemed to choke with emotion. "It's really not worth it." Silvia recalled their past. She had been down with a fever once. Gregory went out in the middle of the night to deliver the medicine, and he almost got himself in an accident. Some fortune teller had told her that she would have a life of loneliness and hardship. So Gregory insisted on kneeling and praying every step of the way to a shrine on top of a mountain. He was on his bleeding knees as he had closed his eyes in devotion and prayed, "May Silvia live a life of peace and happiness." Silvia had been diagnosed with uterine cancer, so she couldn't give birth anymore. Gregory got a vasectomy just to make his stance clear to Wendy. Their relationship had been much better back then. Silvia pulled her hands out of Gregory's grasp. The bruises and needle marks on the back of her hand were clearly visible. However, Gregory ignored all of that and said to her, "Ella has been having a hard time staying at the hotel. She even ate something bad and upset her stomach, and she's hospitalized now. Let's go to the hospital and take her home, all right?" Silvia pointed out indifferently, "Where will she stay then?" "Gregory, I told you I'm going to sell the house." Gregory frowned a little. "Since when? Why would you sell a perfectly fine house?" Silvia sighed. "I told you on Ella's birthday. I said I'm moving out." Gregory pursed his lips tightly, and he didn't say another word. Silence reigned between the two. Some time later, Gregory got to his feet. "Rest up then. I'm going to visit Ella at the hospital. She's sick, so she must have someone with her at all times." After hearing the door click shut, Silvia waited for a moment. Then, she got up and deleted Gregory's fingerprint from the door lock. She returned to her bed, lay down and closed her eyes. She didn't sleep a wink all night. In the morning, when Silvia got up, a wave of dizziness hit her, and she bumped into the bedside table. The necklace fell onto the floor. Fearing that the necklace would be scratched, which would make it a pain to return, she picked it up and examined it in detail. It was then that she spotted some inscriptions on the inner side of the necklace that read, "Love Yar." Silvia thought for a moment, then got up and opened her safe. She realized that her necklace was lying perfectly fine inside. The only difference was that her necklace was inscribed with S.R., her initials. So, Yar could only mean Ella Robinson. It was as clear as day who the owner of the necklace was. Silvia stared at the necklaces for a moment. Then she suddenly laughed. She was supposed to be laughing, but her eyes had reddened. As it turned out, her and Gregory's anniversary happened to be his and Ella's anniversary as well. Wiping the tears from her eyes, she wrapped the necklaces up and went to the hospital. Once at the entrance of the hospital room, Silvia paused in her footsteps. She took several deep breaths before reaching up and opening the door. Gregory's voice rang out from within. "I can only relax around you, Ella." Maybe it's because of the unfortunate circumstances in her childhood, but Silvia always has a lot on her mind. She's sensitive and distrustful, and she's also independent. Over time, it's only natural that she starts feeling stressed. Silvia's hands trembled violently, but Gregory was still talking. "You're different from her. You're so lively and cheerful." Before Silvia could hear the rest of his sentence, she had already turned around and left in a hurry. On her way home, Gregory's words kept repeating themselves in Silvia's mind. Everything she vented to Gregory during her emotional breakdowns had now turned into sharp blades that cut into her. When Gregory first heard from Silvia about her past, he had shed tears for her even though he had always been a strong person. He felt a deep sense of injustice for Silvia and was saddened for her. He swore that he would bring Silvia happiness. But now, with a wry and exasperated tone, he was complaining about her to her half-sister. Silvia began to gasp for air, and her tears streamed down her cheeks uncontrollably. It felt as if her tears would never stop. She felt dizzy, and her breaths became labored. She slashed her nails against her palm, relying on the pain to keep her conscious while she made her way home in determination. She finally began to calm down after taking some pills. She looked at the necklaces, then decisively packed up everything Gregory had ever given her. She arranged for someone to keep it in storage. She would have it delivered to Gregory after she had left. Just then the agent, Alex Brown, called and said someone was interested in the house. He asked when she would be available for the potential buyers to come over in person and take a look at the property. Hence, they settled on a date and time. The potential buyers were a couple who were getting married soon. Judging by the man's still passionate gaze at his fiancée, Silvia could tell that the love they had for each other was still burning bright. "This house looks so cozy. Honey, let's take this one, okay?" the woman asked. The man nodded, then gave her a loving smile. "Of course. As you please, honey." Affected by their sweet interactions, Silvia found herself smiling a little as well. The house was like a sanctuary her grandmother had left her. If it could provide a home for a happy couple, Silvia was sure her grandmother would be happy about it. When they were signing the contract, Silvia noticed that the woman was quite fond of the wooden carving in the living room, so she decisively let them have it. She decided that it would be her way of blessing their marriage. Silvia recalled the moment when Gregory was giving her the carving. He had cuts all over his hands, but he was beaming with satisfaction. He said that when he wasn't around, the little bunny would keep Silvia company in his stead. Now she no longer needed Gregory's company. If the buyers weren't so fond of it, she would have given it back to Gregory or disposed of it. Not long after the paperwork was settled, she received the payment for the house. Silvia checked into a hotel with a decent environment. Aside from going to her regular treatment sessions, she would often take walks outside. The sunlight in late fall was still reasonably warm, so she would often sit in a park nearby and bask in the sun. Gregory and Ella seemed to have faded from her life. In that period, she felt peace she had never experienced before. That was, until it was broken by a phone call from Gregory. Come to the hospital. Now. Immediately. Gregory's tone was extremely stern as he urged her. Silvia really didn't want to go. After the treatment sessions she had gone through since then, Gregory and Ella had become unfamiliar to her. She knew that Ella was her half-sister, and also the daughter of the homewrecker who had destroyed her family. She had seen this half-sister of hers kissing the man Silvia herself was about to marry. When she read about these things in her notebook, she could hardly feel anything anymore. She felt that they no longer had any connection to her. Still, she hadn't clearly told Gregory in person that she was breaking up with him. So she decided to go. She had just arrived at the hospital when she saw everyone gathered in the hospital room. There were Gregory, Tessa, and some others. Silvia stood at the entrance, realizing that there actually wasn't enough space for her to squeeze through. Silvia, how dare you still show up around here? Tom Hunter, who had gone out to get some hot water, instantly flew into a rage when he saw Silvia. The crowd in the room immediately turned around, their gazes filled with fury and disgust. Gregory fed Ella some water, then set down the cup. Turning around, he looked at Silvia with deep disappointment in his gaze. Tell me, why would you do this to Ella? He strode toward Silvia, unable to control himself as he grabbed her by the shoulders and shook her. Ella has always had depression, but you still sent someone to harass her at the hotel. What on earth are you trying to do here? Gregory was gripping Silvia's shoulders so hard that it was hurting her. She tried to get him to let go, but he refused to listen. Even when the crowd saw Gregory treating her like that, no one seemed to care. Among those people were her best friend, whom she had lent the entirety of her savings to, and also a subordinate who made a mistake in a proposal she had stayed up all night to fix. However, without a single exception, they were all glaring at her in hatred as if she were some sort of heinous criminal. It wasn't me, Silvia argued. I haven't even seen her lately. Also, I only found out just now that Ella has depression. Tessa couldn't help speaking up. What do you mean, you only found out just now? If you didn't even know about it, why would you use your status as her legal guardian to tell the doctor not to prescribe Ella any medicine? If Ella had taken her medicine regularly, she wouldn't even be this startled. Why are you still making excuses now that things have come to this point? Don't you know that Ella almost died? It was only then that Silvia spotted Ella, who was shivering as she hid behind Gregory. Yeah? What happened? When Ella heard Silvia's voice, she trembled violently, then stopped moving altogether. Her head was lowered, and no one knew what she was thinking. Silvia approached her to see what exactly was going on with her. To her surprise, Ella suddenly screamed and shouted, "Don't come any closer." Then, she frantically grabbed something nearby and hurled it in Silvia's direction. Silvia couldn't dodge in time, so she was hit squarely on the head. A gash appeared on her forehead, and blood gushed out. Gregory hastily stepped in front of Ella and shouted at Silvia, "Get out! Don't you dare get close to her." Silvia took a deep breath and pressed hard on her wound. She still had to explain everything to Gregory. As she walked out of the room, even with the door between them, she could hear the crowd comforting Ella. Through the glass, she saw Gregory carefully treating the wound on Ella's hand. The crowd was reassuring her, and saying things like the evil woman was gone now. Ella gradually relaxed, and then she hugged Gregory tightly. Gregory held her gently in his arms as he comfortingly patted her on the back. Silvia turned around then asked a nurse for antiseptic and some bandages. The nurse was startled when she saw Silvia's bloodied face, and she immediately took Silvia to get some stitches done. Be extra careful when you go home, okay? Don't get any water on it. Oh, what a pity. A deep wound like that is bound to leave some scars. Silvia smiled and reassured the nurse that it was fine. The treatment for her wound was still underway when Gregory found Silvia. When he saw the gauze on Silvia's forehead, he froze for a moment. Ella isn't mentally stable. She didn't do it on purpose, so don't take it to heart. Silvia shook her head. It's fine. I won't hold anything against a patient. What about you? It must have been tough for you. It's not easy taking care of someone who's ill. Her expression was calm, and anyone could tell that she really didn't mind. Gregory was stunned. After all, he had come prepared to get into an argument with Silvia. Now that she was graciously expressing her understanding, he suddenly didn't know what to say. Well, I'm glad you understand. Does the wound still hurt? Is it serious? Gregory tried to approach her to check on her wound, but Silvia subconsciously backed away, dodging his hand. His hand froze in midair, then dejectedly slumped back down. Before Gregory could say anything, Silvia said to him, "I didn't do anything to Ella." Gregory immediately retorted, "The troublemakers have already identified you as the one responsible. Who else could it have been if not you? Are you telling me Ella did this to herself?" Silvia felt her breath catch in her throat. "If that's what you want to think, I can't do anything about it. I actually came here to talk to you. Let's break." But before she could finish speaking, Tessa came running and said through gasps, "Gregory, Ella just woke up and started freaking out because you weren't there." Without any hesitation or another word, Gregory turned around and ran in the direction of Ella's room. Silvia watched him leave, quietly bidding him goodbye in her heart. Her last treatment would take place in 9 days. After that, she would forget everything. She would completely forget everything, and she wouldn't recall anything anymore. She turned around and left. She bid farewell to her relationship of 10 years, and also the life of suffering she had gone through so far. However, before she could make it out of the hospital, she felt someone grab her from behind. She was about to struggle when she felt a sharp pain in the back of her head. Then she lost consciousness. By the time Silvia came to, she was blinded by the harsh white lights of the hospital. Fighting the splitting headache, she tried to get up but soon realized she couldn't move at all. She lowered her head to find that her body was bound tightly by restraint straps. She had seen the same thing when she went for her treatments. It was used to prevent agitated patients from hurting others and themselves. Still, that didn't explain why she was bound there. Just then the door opened. Gregory slowly appeared before Silvia. He didn't say a word. Instead, he just gazed at her with a complicated look in his eyes. Silvia said, "Gregory, let me go." Gregory shook his head. "Silvia, Ella was deeply traumatized. The doctor said that there's very little chance of her recovering." Silvia retorted, "And so what? I told you, I have nothing to do with what happened to Ella. I had no reason to do those things to her." The last shred of guilt in Gregory's eyes disappeared. "I see you're still stubborn as always, and you're not showing any remorse. If that's the case, there's no need for me to show any mercy either. Why don't you experience the pain of psychiatric treatment yourself? Treat it as your compensation to Ella." With that, Gregory signed the consent form the doctor had handed to him. "Thanks, doctor. You may begin the treatment." He didn't spare Silvia another glance. Silvia watched the doctor prepare the ECT machine, her eyes wide in fury and anguish. She screamed Gregory's name at the top of her lungs, but the man didn't even turn around or hesitate as he opened the door and left. Silvia could only watch as the doctor approached her with a twisted smile on his face. He was holding the paddles of the ECT machine in his hands. "Ms. Robinson, right? Someone specially asked me to take care of you. Don't worry. I guarantee that when you leave this place, not a single mark will be left on you." She watched as he gradually brought the paddles to her temples. Then a sudden jolt of electricity hit her. She couldn't help but let out a scream. She never knew that it would be this painful. She was always under anesthesia during her ECT sessions, so she didn't feel it one bit. She screamed in her mind, "It hurts. It hurts. It hurts." She wanted to struggle, but she couldn't budge an inch. Her mind was filled with questions and curses, but when she opened her mouth, she realized she was completely drained. She thought, "Who am I cursing? Who am I questioning? Do I curse Gregory for being unfaithful or Ella for being selfish? Or do I curse my mother, who made me suffer yet raised me all the same? Or should I curse my father who abandoned mom and me to elope with his lover?" Silvia had spent most of her life in hatred and suffering. Now she had grown weary of it, and she didn't want to think about these things anymore. The next surge of electrical current came as expected. She couldn't stop her body from twitching at all. After the electric shock stopped, she lay back down, completely drained. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She told herself that she just had to endure it, and she would be out in no time. 7 days later, Silvia was finally released. She was in a daze, and she didn't offer much of a response when she saw Gregory. Gregory softly called her name and draped a jacket over her. "Silvia, let's go home." Silvia's expression was blank as she flung the jacket onto the floor and shook off Gregory's hands. She opened her mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "Go away, Gregory. I don't want to see you ever again." As Gregory stared at the jacket on the floor, he couldn't quite put his feelings into words. "I know you'd get mad at me, but trust me, I'm doing this for your own good. You have to pay the price for the things you do. I can't just sit by and watch you bully your own sister. Silvia, I swear I'll make it up to you." Silvia didn't say another word. After all, anything she said would be futile. She didn't want to see Gregory ever again. She was racking her brains for a way to stop him from following her around, but then his phone rang. Gregory was about to decline the call when he caught sight of the caller ID. He picked up the call instead. Ella's voice rang out. "Gregory, where are you? I just woke up, and I can't find you anywhere. I think I'm panicking." Are you going to abandon me as my parents and Silvia did? Gregory's voice was gentle as he replied. Of course not. I just had something urgent to take care of. I have an appointment I can't decline. I'll be right back to be with you, okay? Silvia could clearly hear Ella's sobs coming from the other end of the line. Gregory, I'm really scared. Gregory couldn't bother with anything else anymore. He said, hold on. I'm coming. After he ended the call, Silvia could sense him looking at her and hesitating to speak. So she said, go ahead. I can just take a cab. Gregory could see that Silvia didn't care at all. He wanted to say something, but then he remembered that Ella was on the verge of a breakdown. In the end, he chose to hurry back to the hospital. Silvia hailed a cab to the treatment center for her final ECT session. After she closed her eyes, the nurse gently said, Ms. Robinson, relax. This will be your last treatment. I hope this is the last time I'm meeting you here, and I wish nothing but good things for your life in the future. Silvia didn't say a word. During the final moments, as the anesthesia started kicking in, a single tear escaped her eye. When the world returned to Silvia, it arrived not with a violent jolt, but with the quiet clarity of morning light spilling over a bare wooden floor. The smell of ozone and sterile gauze was faint. A nurse in pale blue scrubs was adjusting the drip on the four-stand beside the recovery cot. When the nurse saw Silvia's eyelids flutter, her expression softened into a look of profound relief. You're awake, Ms. Robinson. Take it slow. Don't try to sit up just yet. Silvia stared at the acoustic tiles on the ceiling. There were 72 perforations in the square directly above her head. She counted them once, then twice, admiring the neat symmetry. Her mind felt like an empty room whose walls had just been washed down with cold water. How is the headache? The nurse asked softly, resting 2 fingers against Silvia's wrist to check her pulse. Dull, Silvia said. Her voice was slightly hoarse, like dry paper rubbing together, like a distant storm that passed hours ago. That's normal. Your vitals are completely stable. The physician reviewed your post-treatment EEG 20 minutes ago. The neuroelectrical stabilization is optimal. The nurse patted her hand. You've completed the full protocol. No. More sessions. Silvia reached into the pocket of her coat, which hung on the chair beside the cot, and pulled out her leather-bound notebook. Her fingers moved with practiced efficiency. She turned past several pages of dense, cramped handwriting until she reached the final entry she had made before entering the procedure room. 1. You sold the house on Maple Lane. The money is in your private offshore account. 2. Your father was Jared Robinson. He died when you were young. He owed you nothing, and you owe his memory nothing. 3. Ella Robinson is a legal stranger. You have signed the formal severance of familial obligations. 4. Gregory Fisher is an acquaintance from your previous decade of life. You have severed all ties. If he approaches you, do not engage. 5. The train to Oakhaven leaves at 4:15 p.m. from Central Terminal, Platform 3. She read the words 3 times. They did not hurt. When she read the name Gregory Fisher, there was no tight knot in her chest, no bitter taste of bile in the back of her throat, no phantom memory of wedding dresses or anniversary necklaces. The words were merely historical data, like reading a factual summary of a war fought 2 centuries ago in a country she had never visited. Thank you, Silvia said to the nurse, swinging her legs over the side of the cot. The nurse looked slightly startled. Are you sure you don't want to rest for another 30 minutes, Ms. Robinson? Most patients feel disoriented after their final round. I have never been more oriented in my life, Silvia replied with a faint, polite smile. She stood up. Her balance was steady. The faint dizziness that had plagued her for months was gone, replaced by a cool, unshakable equilibrium. She walked out of the clinic into the late autumn afternoon. The air was crisp and scented with dry leaves and distant wood smoke. She didn't take a taxi back to the hotel. She walked the 3 miles to the station, her small leather duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her hands resting comfortably in the deep pockets of her wool coat. At 4:15 p.m., the train pulled out of Central Terminal. As the gray skyline of the city receded behind the tinted double-pane glass, Silvia took out her SIM card, snapped it cleanly between her thumb and forefinger, and dropped the plastic pieces into the disposable coffee cup on her tray table. She pulled a soft gray travel blanket over her lap, leaned her forehead against the glass, and closed her eyes. She did not dream. Gregory Fisher stepped out of his Mercedes in front of the 2-story brick house on Maple Lane, carrying a box of warm almond pastries from the French bakery Silvia used to love. It had been 4 days since he left her outside the private clinic. In those 4 days, Ella's condition had been exhausting. She had cried whenever he left the room, complained that the hospital sheets were rough against her sensitive skin, and demanded that he personally hand-feed her every meal. She had thrown a tantrum when Wendy, his mother, refused to visit her, accusing Gregory of not defending her honor. I need a break, Gregory had muttered to himself that morning as he slipped out of Ella's VIP suite while she slept. I need Silvia. Silvia was always calm. Silvia never screamed, never threw dishes, and never demanded that he spend 5 hours choosing the right shade of silk for her bedspread. When he was tired, Silvia would simply make tea, place a warm towel over his eyes, and sit quietly beside him while he worked. He walked up the front steps of Maple Lane, unlocked his phone and stepped up to the door. He pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. Beep beep. Access denied. Gregory frowned. Must be a low battery. He pulled his key from his ring, slid it into the lock and turned it. It didn't budge. The cylinder had been completely replaced with a high-security deadbolt. What is she doing now? He muttered, an irritated sigh escaping his lips. Still playing games? He knocked sharply on the heavy oak door. Silvia. Open up. It's me. I brought the almond pastries you like. Let's talk like adults. Footsteps sounded inside, followed by the slide of a brass chain. The door swung open. Standing on the other side was not Silvia in her knitted cardigan, but a young man in paint-splattered jeans holding a cordless drill. Behind him, a woman in an apron was wiping down the entryway baseboards. Can I help you? The young man asked, looking at Gregory with polite confusion. Gregory stared past him into the living room. The gray linen couch was gone, replaced by a plush sectional in mustard yellow. The walls had been repainted from Silvia's calm slate gray to a warm terracotta. Where is Silvia? Gregory demanded, his voice hardening. Who are you? What are you doing in this house? The woman in the apron walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. Are you the previous owner's friend? We bought this house 3 weeks ago through Premier Real Estate. The deed was transferred on the 12th. Bought it? Gregory's voice cracked. That's impossible. This is Silvia Robinson's house. Her grandmother left it to her. Well, Ms. Robinson sold it, the young man said, crossing his arms, his tone turning cautious. Paid in full, all liens cleared, clean title. She had all her furniture cleared out by a professional moving crew 2 weeks ago. If you're looking for her, you should call her. Gregory's hand holding the bakery box went completely limp. The box slipped from his fingers, hitting the welcome mat with a dull thud, the warm pastries tumbling out onto the stone step. He pulled out his phone, his thumb shaking as he dialed Silvia's number. The number you have dialed is not in service or has been disconnected. Please check the number and dial again. He dialed her work extension at the tech firm. Department of Systems Architecture, how may I direct your call? Silvia Robinson. Connect me to her desk immediately. Ms. Robinson resigned from the company 3 weeks ago, sir. Her final clearance was processed at the end of last month. Would you like to leave a message for human resources? The phone slid from Gregory's ear. The autumn wind whipped through the front porch, scattering the dry yellow leaves across his polished leather shoes. For 10 years, Silvia had been like the foundation of a house, quiet, unnoticed, and permanent. He had walked on her, built his ego on top of her, and taken for granted that no matter how far he wandered, the foundation would always be there, beneath his feet. Now he looked down at the ground, and there was nothing but a gaping, bottomless abyss. At 2 p.m., Gregory was summoned to the downtown logistics depot of Crown Storage Services. Mr. Gregory Fisher? The desk clerk asked, looking over her reading glasses. We have 3 heavy crates and a security deposit lockbox registered under your name, paid for by Ms. Silvia Robinson prior to her departure. Where did she go? Gregory asked, lunging across the counter, his eyes bloodshot, his suit jacket wrinkled. What forwarding address did she leave? Client confidentiality prevents us from sharing routing information, the clerk said flatly. Sign here, please. 20 minutes later, Gregory sat on an upturned wooden pallet in the corner of the vast, echoing warehouse surrounded by 3 open cardboard crates. Inside were 10 years of his life. In the first crate were every single watch, silk tie, fountain pen, and cufflink he had ever left at Silvia's house. Each item was individually wrapped in acid-free tissue paper, labeled with the exact date and occasion it had been received. In the second crate were every handwritten card he had ever sent her, every movie ticket stub from their university days, and the framed photo of them standing on the mountain peak where he had once bled on his knees to pray for her peace. In the third crate was a smaller velvet box. Gregory's hands trembled so violently he could barely lift the latch. Inside lay 2 identical custom Chomet necklaces. The ruby on the left was inscribed SR. The ruby on the right was inscribed Love Yar. Resting directly on top of the velvet lining was Silvia's platinum engagement ring, the simple, elegant band he had slipped onto her finger 5 years ago, swearing that he would never let anyone make her feel small again. Pinned beneath the ring was a single sheet of paper. Legal notice of severance and discharge of obligation. To Gregory Fisher and Ella Robinson. From Silvia Robinson. I, Silvia Robinson, hereby declare the total and permanent dissolution of all personal, financial, and legal relationships with the aforementioned parties. All gifts, assets, and liabilities have been returned or liquidated in full. Do not contact me. Do not seek me. You are strangers. Gregory pressed the paper against his chest, his breath catching in a ragged, suffocating gasp. No, he sobbed into the empty warehouse, the sound echoing off the high, corrugated iron ceiling. Silvia, no, no, no. You wouldn't, you loved me. For 10 years. His phone rang in his pocket. He snatched it, his heart leaping with a desperate, pathetic hope. Silvia. Gregory. Where are you? Ella's whining, petulant voice exploded through the speaker. The hospital is demanding that I settle the room bill before 4 p.m. And your mother came by and called me a gold-digging parasite. She had the nurse throw my flowers into the hallway. You have to come back right now and put her in her place. Gregory looked at the 2 ruby necklaces resting in the box before him. He looked at the inscription, Love Yar, the secret confession he had commissioned. On the very same day he had proposed to Silvia, convincing himself that he was merely being protective of a lonely, beautiful girl who needed him more than Silvia did. Gregory? Are you listening to me? Ella screamed. I'm having another panic attack. My chest hurts. If you don't come right now, I'm going to take all my pills. For the first time in his life, Gregory did not feel a rush of protective panic. He felt a deep, cold, rancid disgust that started in the back of his throat and spread through his entire body. Shut up, Ella, Gregory said. His voice was deathly quiet. The line went dead silent for 2 seconds. What? What did you just say to me? Ella gasped, her voice trembling with manufactured shock. I said, shut your mouth, Gregory whispered, his fingers tightening around the edge of the cardboard crate until the cardboard buckled. You are 21 years old. Pay your own bill. He ended the call, dropped the phone onto the concrete floor, and brought his heavy boot down squarely onto the glass screen, crushing it into 100 glittering shards. While Gregory sat in the ruins of his past in the storage facility, the high-rise offices of Apex Creative Consulting were descending into chaos. Tessa Meyer stood before the chief creative officer's desk, her face as pale as chalk, clutching a leather portfolio containing the revised pitch deck for the Zenith Global campaign. What do you mean the client rejected the framework? Tessa pleaded, her voice high and tight. I spent 2 weeks on this strategy. The chief creative officer, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, looked at Tessa over her spectacles with unvarnished contempt. You spent 2 weeks cutting and pasting generic market trends, Tessa, the director said coldly. The data models are full of mathematical errors, the audience segmentation is completely outdated, and the risk mitigation matrix is non-existent. That's impossible. I used the exact same template I've used for the last 3 years. You used the templates that Silvia Robinson built for you, the director interrupted, tapping a hard finger against the glass desk. Everyone in this agency knew that whenever you had a major pitch, Silvia stayed up until 3 a.m., fixing your spreadsheets, rewriting your executive summaries, and restructuring your financial forecasts because you were her best friend. Tessa's breath caught in her throat. Silvia is gone, the director continued smoothly. And without her doing your job for you, your real competence is painfully clear. The board has decided not to renew your contract. Pack your desk by 5 p.m. Tessa stumbled out of the executive suite, her mind spinning in a whirlwind of terror. She pulled out her phone and frantically dialed Ella. Yeah. Thank God you picked up. Tessa wept into the receiver, ducking into the stairwell. I just got fired. The agency let me go. Can I stay at your apartment for a few days until I get my severance check? Remember when you told me that whatever happened, we'd always have each other's backs? On the other end of the line, Ella let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Stay at my apartment? Ella scoffed, her sweet, childlike demeanor entirely gone, replaced by the razor-sharp arrogance of a cornered narcissist. Are you out of your mind, Tessa? I'm living in a hotel suite that costs $600 a night, and Gregory just canceled the card. I don't have time to deal with your pathetic little problems. Why don't you go cry to Silvia like you always do? Yeah. What are you saying? Tessa stammered, tears blurring her vision. I defended you. When Silvia caught you and Gregory, I stood in front of everyone and told her she was being cruel to you. I took your side. And who asked you to, you stupid bitch? Ella hissed into the phone. You did that because you were jealous of Silvia your whole life, and you wanted an excuse to see her brought down. Don't act like you did it for me. Don't ever call this number again. Click. Tessa stood in the concrete stairwell, listening to the hollow dial tone. She slumped against the fire door, sliding down until her knees hit the cold concrete, burying her face in her hands. She remembered the winter 5 years ago when she had lost every penny of her life savings to an online investment scam. She remembered sitting in Silvia's small kitchen, shivering in shame, while Silvia quietly handed her a bank draft for $40,000, the entirety of Silvia's graduate school fund, and whispered, "Don't cry, Tessa. We'll get through it together." And she remembered how, for weeks ago, she had stood in that same living room, pointed a finger at Silvia's face, and called her a heartless monster for not giving Ella her birthday present. "What have I done?" Tessa whispered into the dark stairwell, her sobs turning into dry, ragged gasps. "God, what did I do?" The hammer fell on the third Friday of November. 2 black unmarked sedans pulled up outside the private gate of St. Jude's Neuropsychiatric Sanitarium on the southern outskirts of the city. For detectives from the Special Crimes Division, accompanied by 2 state medical board inspectors, marched through the polished glass doors and straight into the executive office of Dr. Harrison Vance, the physician who had administered Silvia's forced ECT treatments. "Dr. Vance?" Detective Miller asked, holding up an official search and seizure warrant. The doctor's pen hovered over a patient chart. His face went instantly gray. "What is the meaning of this? This is a private, accredited medical institution." "It was," the detective said, signaling to the 2 officers behind him. "Until 2 hours ago, when the Department of Financial Oversight flagged 25 consecutive cash transfers from Gregory Fisher's private account to your offshore shell company in the Cayman Islands." The inspector stepped forward, pulling a digital tablet from his briefcase. "We have reviewed the surveillance logs from Ward C between October 14th and October 21st, the inspector said, his voice dripping with disgust. "You administered 7 consecutive sessions of unanesthetized electroconvulsive therapy to patient Silvia Robinson without legal medical guardianship, without secondary psychiatric evaluation, and without valid therapeutic justification." She was agitated. Dr. Vance shouted, backing toward the window. "Her fiance signed the proxy consent." "A fiancé has 0 legal medical proxy rights under state law," the detective snapped, grabbing the doctor's wrist and snapping the steel handcuffs around his wrists with a sharp clack. "You performed medical battery and torture for hire, Dr. Vance. You are facing 25 years in the state penitentiary." As the doctor was led out through the lobby in chains, the detectives began seizing every hard drive and paper file in the facility. Among the seized records was a private audio log recorded by Dr. Vance's receptionist during Ella Robinson's initial consultation 3 months earlier. The recording was played 48 hours later in the conference room of the Central District Police Precinct, in the presence of Gregory Fisher, his mother, Wendy, and 3 prosecuting attorneys. On the recording, Ella's voice was crystal clear, completely devoid of any trace of anxiety or emotional distress. "Make sure the diagnosis says severe suicidal depression with violent tendencies. If the report looks bad enough, my sister will be legally forced to surrender the property deed to pay for my long-term inpatient care. And tell Gregory that the only way to keep me from jumping off a bridge is if he spends every night at my hotel. The idiot believes everything I say anyway." Then came the second voice, a local gang affiliate who had been arrested 2 days prior for extortion. "Yeah, the girl paid me $5,000 to kick her hotel door in and smash a couple of lamps. She told me to say her sister Silvia sent us. It was all a setup." The recording clicked off. The conference room was as silent as a tomb. Wendy Fisher slowly turned her head, looking at her son with eyes full of absolute, murderous rage. "That," Wendy said, her voice trembling with cold aristocratic fury, "is the woman for whom you threw away a 10-year engagement with the only decent person who ever entered this family." Gregory didn't speak. He sat with his head in his hands, his knuckles pressed so hard into his eye sockets that red stars danced across his vision. He remembered standing in the hospital room, looking at the blood pouring from Silvia's forehead after Ella threw a heavy glass vase at her. He remembered shouting at Silvia, "Get out! Don't you dare get close to her!" He remembered walking into the private clinic room, looking down at Silvia, strapped to the restraint table, and telling her, "Why don't you experience the pain of psychiatric treatment yourself? Treat it as your compensation to Ella." "I tortured her," Gregory whispered into his open palms. His voice didn't sound human. It sounded like dry leather tearing apart. "She was innocent, and I put her into that machine." He looked up at the ceiling and let out a broken, howling scream that rattled the frosted glass of the precinct windows. 700 miles to the north, in the coastal village of Port Mercer, the winter was quiet and clean. The town sat on a horseshoe-shaped bay, where the dark Atlantic met rolling cliffs of slate and wild gorse. The air smelled of salt spray, wet cedar, and cold fresh rain. At the edge of the stone harbor sat a narrow, two-story building with whitewashed brick walls and sea-green wooden shutters. The hanging copper sign. Above the door read, "The Solitary Fern, Rare Botanicals and Second-Hand Books." Behind the counter, Silvia Robinson was tying a bunch of dried lavender with natural jute twine. She was wearing an oversized cable-knit sweater in forest green, her dark hair pinned loosely behind her ears with a carved wooden stick. Her cheeks were faintly pink from the morning sea breeze, and her eyes were clear, bright, and completely undisturbed by shadows. A small brass bell above the front door chimed. An elderly woman with a woven wicker basket walked in, stamping the rain from her rubber boots. "Morning, Silvia," Mrs. Gable said with a broad, toothy smile. "Did that shipment of winter cyclamen arrive on the morning ferry?" "Right here, Mrs. Gable," Silvia said, her voice light and melodic as she lifted a wooden crate of vibrant magenta blossoms onto the counter. "I kept them in the back greenhouse overnight so the frost wouldn't touch the roots." "You have the gentlest hands in the whole county, dear," the old woman said, placing a freshly baked loaf of sourdough bread on the counter beside the flowers. "Baked this an hour ago. Rosemary and sea salt. Make sure you eat it while it's still warm." "Thank you, Mrs. Gable," Silvia smiled, wrapping the bread in a clean linen towel. "I'll have it with my tea at noon." After the customer left, Silvia picked up a brass watering can and walked through the glass door into the rear solarium. The greenhouse was warm, heated by a cast iron wood stove in the corner. Rows of ferns, climbing jasmine, scented geraniums, and winter herbs hung from the cedar rafters in a lush, fragrant canopy. In the center of the solarium sat a sturdy wooden workbench. On the corner of the workbench was her old leather notebook. Silvia picked it up, flipping through the yellowed pages. She had not written a new entry in 6 months. She looked at the old notes, the names, the accounts, the reminders of past betrayals, and felt the same mild, distant curiosity one might feel while looking at a display of ancient pottery in a museum. She took a pair of shears from the hook, carefully snipped the bound binding of the notebook, and dropped the handwritten pages into the open firebox of the wood stove. The dry paper caught instantly. The ink curled, blackened, and vanished into a brief, bright burst of golden flame, turning into a handful of gray ash that drifted up the chimney into the cold coastal sky. She closed the cast iron door, took a deep breath of the damp, earthy fragrance of the blooming jasmine, and smiled. For 2 years, Gregory Fisher lived in hell. The scandal of the illegal medical battery destroyed his standing in the tech industry. His name was blacklisted by every major venture fund in the country. To avoid a 5-year prison sentence, he signed over 70% of his personal assets to settle the state's civil restitution fund, and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. His mother, Wendy, formally disinherited him, removing his name from the family trust and moving to her estate in southern France, refusing to take his calls. As for Ella Robinson, when the criminal indictments were handed down, Ella attempted to flee the state using a counterfeit passport. She was arrested at the airport, convicted of grand fraud, conspiracy to commit medical battery, and extortion, and sentenced to 6 years at the Western Women's Correctional Facility. Every 6 months, Ella sent Gregory letters from prison, filled with hysterical promises of love, begging him to deposit money into her commissary account, swearing that she had only done it because she was young and confused. Gregory never opened a single envelope. He threw every letter directly into the fireplace of his small, rented basement apartment, watching them burn with cold, dead eyes. He had only one obsession left in his life: finding Silvia. He hired 4 private investigation agencies, spent his remaining savings tracking down bank routing numbers, cross-referencing property transfers, and searching through hundreds of small maritime towns along the northern coast. "I just need to see her once," Gregory would whisper to himself late at night, staring at the small rabbit wood carving he had stolen back from the couple who bought the Maple Lane house. "I just need to tell her that I know the truth, that I punished everyone, that I am ready to spend the rest of my life on my knees to earn her back." In early spring of the 3rd year, an investigator in Boston called him. "We found her, Mr. Fisher. Port Mercer. She owns a small plant shop near the public wharf." Gregory didn't pack a bag. He didn't even change his coat. He grabbed his car keys, got into his battered sedan, and drove 14 hours through a driving rainstorm, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. The rain in Port Mercer had cleared by noon, leaving the cobbled streets washed clean under a pale, luminous spring sun. Gregory stood across the narrow harbor road, his breath misting in the cold air, his eyes fixed on the green-shuttered shop, the Solitary Fern. His hands were shaking violently inside his coat pockets. He looked at his reflection in the window of a bakery across the street. His hair was threaded with premature silver at the temples, his face gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by 3 years of sleeplessness and torment. He smoothed down the collar of his coat, took a deep, trembling breath, and crossed the street. The brass bell chimed softly as he pushed the door open. The scent of damp earth, blooming citrus, and fresh paper washed over him. Behind the counter, a woman was carefully repotting a small white orchid into a terracotta dish. She wore a soft cream-colored sweater, her hair catching the golden light from the bay window. Her skin was smooth, unblemished, and glowing with an effortless, serene vitality that knocked the breath out of Gregory's lungs. She looked 5 years younger than the exhausted, silent woman who had walked out of the hospital 3 years ago. Silvia. Gregory choked out. The word was barely louder than a whisper, but in the quiet shop it was like a thunderclap. Silvia set down her small metal trowel, wiped her hands on a clean linen apron, and looked up. Her dark eyes met his. Gregory braced himself. He had imagined this moment 10,000 times in the dark. He had prepared for her to scream at him, to slap him, to curse him for the 7 days of electric shocks, to weep in bitter fury, to throw the pots at his head. He was ready for all of it. He had planned to drop to both knees, to press his forehead against the floorboards, to tell her that she could strike him, starve him, or break his bones as long as she allowed him to stay nearby. None of that happened. Silvia looked at his face for 3 seconds. Her eyebrows did not knit together in anger. Her jaw did not tighten. Her pulse did not jump in the hollow of her throat. Her expression was the completely pleasant, neutral, professional mask of a shopkeeper greeting an unfamiliar customer on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. "Good afternoon, sir," Silvia said, her voice smooth, polite, and bright. "How can I help you today? Are you looking for indoor foliage or something for a garden border?" Gregory froze. The air left his chest in a single, agonizing gasp. "Silvia," he stammered, taking a staggering step toward the counter, reaching out with both hands. "It's me. It's Gregory." Silvia tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes reflecting his disheveled appearance without a single flicker of recognition. "Gregory," she repeated the name thoughtfully, as if searching a mental index of suppliers or distant acquaintances from another town. Then she smiled politely and shook her head. "I'm sorry, sir. Have we met before? Did you place a custom order for the spring bulb shipment under that name? I don't recall seeing a Gregory in my customer ledger." "Stop." Gregory's voice cracked into a dry, broken sob. "Silvia, please. Don't do this. Don't act like you don't know me. I know what I did. I know about the clinic. I know about the necklaces. I know Ella lied about everything. She's in prison, Silvia. I sent Dr. Vance to prison. I ruined them all for you." He lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the wooden counter, tears streaming down his hollow, stubbled cheeks. "I spent 2 years looking for you. Look at me, Silvia. Look at your Gregory. I brought the bunny carving. I'll sell everything I have. I'll move here. I'll clean your shop. I'll sleep on the porch. Just don't look at me like I'm a stranger." Silvia took a calm, unhurried half-step back from the counter, putting a safe, respectable distance between them. She looked at the weeping, hysterical man before her, her expression shifting from polite confusion to mild, gentle concern, the kind of look one gives to a confused, unwell traveler who has wandered into the wrong building. "Sir," Silvia said softly, her voice steady and completely devoid of fear. "You seem very distressed. Is there someone I can call for you? A family member or a local doctor? The medical clinic is just 2 streets up on Harbor Way." Gregory stared into her eyes. He searched the dark irises for a trace of the girl who had waited 3 hours in the snow to buy him a birthday cake. He searched for the woman who had held his hand through his father's funeral. He searched for the woman who had looked at him with silent, desperate agony while he signed the consent form in the white room. There was nothing. The eyes looking back at him were vast, calm, and clear as a winter sea. There was no hatred. There was no resentment. There was not even the satisfaction of revenge. He was not an enemy. He was not a monster. To Silvia Robinson, Gregory Fisher was simply a man standing in a flower shop on a sunny afternoon. A collection of atoms possessing no more emotional weight than a handful of gravel on the roadside. The realization struck Gregory with the force of an iron blade driven through his sternum. She had not run away to punish him. She had not hidden to make him feel guilty. She had simply cut him out of her existence like a dead branch, burned the roots, and moved on into the sunlight, leaving him behind in a dark, empty world, where he was completely, irrevocably forgotten. You really don't remember," Gregory whispered, his knees giving out beneath him. He collapsed onto the floorboards, his back against the display rack of terracotta pots, his hands clutching his chest as if his heart were tearing in two. "You don't remember 10 years. You don't remember me." Silvia walked around the counter, picked up a small glass of water from the side table, and set it on the bench beside him. "Drink some water, sir," she said gently. "Take a few minutes to rest. When you feel better, Please close the door on your way out. The sea breeze can be a bit chilly for the seedlings. She didn't wait for his answer. She picked up her metal trowel, walked through the glass door into the sun-drenched greenhouse, and closed the latch behind her. Through the glass, Gregory watched her reach up to tie back a blooming vine of white jasmine. The afternoon sun washed over her hair, her shoulders, and her smiling face as she hummed a soft, wordless melody to herself, completely alone, completely whole, and completely untouched by his existence. Gregory sat on the floor of the shop, buried his face in his hands, and wept until there were no tears left to shed. Half an hour later, he stood up on trembling legs, pushed open the shop door, and walked out into the cold harbor wind. He never returned. 5 years later, the summer sunset over Port Mercer turned the water of the bay into a wide sheet of liquid gold and deep violet. On the wooden terrace behind the solitary fern, overlooking the quiet harbor, where fishing boats bobbed gently against their moorings, a small dinner table was set for 4. Silvia sat at the head of the table, wearing a simple linen sundress, laughing as Mrs. Gable's grandson tried to balance a lemon on his nose. The air was warm, scented with grilled sea bass, fresh rosemary, sweet white wine, and the rich, blooming fragrance of honeysuckle climbing the garden fence. Her friend Sarah, who ran the local pottery studio down the lane, poured 2 glasses of crisp white wine and handed one to Silvia. To a record-breaking summer season, Sarah said with a bright, clinking toast. And to the best botanical master in the province. Silvia clinked her glass, the crystal chiming clearly in the evening air. To peace, Silvia smiled, taking a sip of the cool, fruity wine. She looked out over the quiet water, watching the white gulls wheel against the pink-tinged clouds. Sometimes, when the wind blew hard from the south, she would catch the faint, phantom scent of an old city she had once lived in, or remember the outline of a house with brick walls and maple trees. She knew she had lived another life once. She knew there had been cold rooms, sharp words, and heavy debts that were not hers to carry. She reached up, her fingers lightly brushing against the smooth, unblemished skin of her temples. The scars were gone. The voices were silent. The world before her was wide, bright, and boundless. Silvia Robinson leaned back in her chair, took a deep breath of the sweet, salt-laced air, and let the warm summer night wash over her like a blessing.